there, folks. This is Alexandra Blevins, the Forest Health Specialist with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. And today we're here in beautiful Christian County to talk about the symptoms of Laurel Wilt disease, a new disease to the state of Kentucky. Not only are we going to touch on what to look for, but we're also going to address how to take a good sample and get that to the lab. So if you live on the Tennessee-Kentucky border within Christian County, Todd, Logan, these are the first 3 counties that we found this disease in back in 2019. In 2020, we found it in 7 new counties, and we're still looking for this disease in more counties to date. What do you need to look for in sassafras? Well, first of all, the thing that always tips me off is early fall coloration. So if you know sassafras, you know that it is beautiful during the fall. You have these great hues of red, orange, and gold. If you're seeing that in the peak of the summer, like right now, that's not a good sign. You might first think that this tree might be water stressed. The leaves will turn these fall colors, and then they'll start to kind of droop and look a little sad, and then they'll actually just get completely dried out and turn this really dark bronze, reddish brown color, and they're going to just dangle on the branches. And you'll eventually have a dead tree on your hands. So if you're seeing anything like this, we're almost about 80% positive that you've got laurel wilt on your hands, but you're going to want to do a little closer investigation of this tree. So the next thing that you can look for, as I mentioned, this is a tiny, tiny ambrosia beetle. So they're kind of hard to spot. But you can look for sawdust around the base of the sassafras tree, and even something called a frass toothpick. So frass is just a fancy term for bug excrement. So you will see these tiny little toothpicks, if you're lucky, sticking out of the tree. And this is a sign that you could have the red bay ambrosia beetle on your property or in your tree. So, those are some beetle signs that you can look for. And then if you want to take it a step further, there is a destructive sampling process that we do. You will take a hatchet or any kind of knife, especially if you have a younger tree. You can get through that bark a little bit more easily. If it's an older tree with thicker bark, you might need the hatchet. And you're going to just want to slough off the bark and get to that initial layer of sapwood. And sometimes you might have to go just a little bit deeper. And you're going to see that really iconic staining of the sapwood, that dark streaking of almost black, dark brown coloration. That's what we're looking for. And so to be 100% positive that this is laurel wilt, you've got to take a really good sample. Want to get a sample about 1 inch to 2 inches of that really dark staining, and you want it to be fresh. So you want to make sure that it's fresh, and then make sure when you get your sample to bag it up while it's still really fresh and a little bit wet to the touch. Some things that you really want to make sure that you include are your location, of course, the date it was collected, and if you can get a coordinate, that would be great, and also the county level, so what county you collected it in. And so just try to get as detailed as you can on where you got that sample from. And another step that's really nice, it keeps your sample as fresh as possible, is to pack with you a tiny little cooler with some, little disposable ice packs in there, and keep your sample in that cooler until it gets to the lab. Or, if you have to stop off somewhere, fridge it, not freezer, put it in the fridge until you can get that sample to the diagnostic lab. And that is the best way to collect a sample. So what I like to do, I kind of angle it in at like a 45-degree angle, just to make sure that you're getting all that fungus. All right, you can see that the staining really just occurs in a thin little layer of the sapwood there, and that's what we're shooting for. We want this material to be as fresh as possible, so kind of wet to the touch, a little slimy. If you feel that, you've got a good sample on your hands. And they need about, you know, a good inch, you know, a square inch, I guess, of stained material to be able to sample from at the diagnostic lab. So this is plenty. If you're ever in doubt, you can always get more. So I think this is a good sample for the lab. So, since this is such a new disease to the state of Kentucky, we are doing all that we can to try to figure out where this disease is and how to best track it and monitor it. So what the Kentucky Division of Forestry's Forest Health Program is doing, we're out there putting in the miles, scouting for symptoms of this disease. So how can you help us and what can you do? So one of the things that I am always on the lookout for when I'm out driving around, you want to look for, unfortunately, dead sassafras trees or wilted sassafras. And so what exactly is that going to look like? Well, if you've ever spent any time in the woods and studying the sassafras, they have kind of a peculiar color to their bark. It's almost like an orange tint. And when you're left with just those gnarly orange branches that kind of stick out along the fence rows, especially out here in western Kentucky, they stick out like a sore thumb. So you can look for those gnarly orange branches and stop and take a closer look for that staining. Now, and the majority of the time, when you have a tree that's already that far gone, you're not going to be able to collect a good sample out of it because the wood tissue itself is going to be dead, and the lab will not be able to get you know, a fresh enough sample from that. So if you find yourself in that predicament, you know, just drive a little bit further up the road, and almost 95% of the time you're going to find some more infected sassafras, and they might not be as far gone. So sometimes, as I mentioned before, the leaves will still be attached to the tree, but they're going to be completely wilted, so that dark bronze coloration. You can check trees like that. Or if they're in the initial stages of wilt and they've got that early fall coloration, look for that, those really strong eye-catching hues of the golds and the oranges and the reds. And sure enough, you'll probably find staining in those trees. So that's what I typically look for when I'm out driving around. And if you could help us in this endeavor, that would be amazing. All right, so another important topic that we really need to address when collecting samples for any type of vascular disease, including Laurel Wilt, you must clean off your tools after each tree or spice bush that you hack into. These fungal pathogens spread very easily. So another, you know, items that I like to keep with me at all times are just, you know, some rubbing alcohol. If it's got like at least 90% alcohol in there, that's great. But as long as you've got something pretty strong, that should do the trick. And so anything that you use to cut into the wood of the infected tree or potentially infected tree, you're going to want to just really wipe that down. So I always keep some alcohol with me and you know, some paper towels, and just give this a good rub down. So I use both my hatchet and my knife, so I'm going to make sure that I clean off both of these really well. And you know, this is going to kill, you know, any of that fungi that's on there. So we got the hatchet, it's ready to go for the next one. And then my knife, just to make sure we're getting all that fungus off of there. Because, you know, that's something that we really don't want to do. We've already have too much human-assisted movement of these diseases, so we're trying to stop it in our tracks when we can.